Have you ever read something 3 times, watched a video explaining it, and then still didn't really feel like you understood it? There's a few common mistakes we all make when we're trying to learn something new, and there's actually a really simple method for fixing how we learn so you don't just memorize things, you actually learn them on a really deep level. And this is called the Feynman Technique. This technique was coined after Richard Feynman, who was really well known for being able to take extremely complex topics and distill them down into really simple, easy to understand terms. The core idea here is that if you can't explain something simply to somebody else, you actually don't understand it yet. And the way to implement this, there's actually 4 steps to the Feynman technique. The first thing is choosing the concept. So pick the thing that you want to learn. Whatever it is you're trying to gain information about, take some time to learn it. The second part is explain it like you're a beginner. If you were to go to somebody else and try to explain this concept to them in very simple terms, how would you explain it? I want you to imagine that you were explaining it to a 12-year-old. Something I've heard very commonly in the world of content creation and things like that is try to simplify your information down to the level of a 6th grader. And I want you to think of this the exact same way. Distill it down as if you were talking to someone in elementary school and explain it to them in very simple terms. Step 3 of this is once you start explaining it that way, you'll be able to identify the gaps. You'll be able to figure out where you lack understanding enough to explain it in a simple manner. Step 4 is going back and continuing to refine and simplify until the explanation feels clear, short, and intuitive, until you understand it so well that you can really distill it down to its most basic terms and explain it to somebody else. This is how you take surface level knowledge and translate it into deep understanding. Now, I'm going to explain a few ways where people get this wrong. The first one is the recognition trap, and what this looks like is thinking that you understand something just because it looks familiar. So think of all the times where you have read through large chunks of textbooks over and over again, you've highlighted the things that you think are important, you've written down the notes, and because you've seen the information repeatedly, it's familiar to you and you think you understand it. But if someone actually asked you to explain the concept, you wouldn't be able to. And this is a common mistake a lot of people make when they're trying to learn new information. I remember when I was in nursing school, this was my approach. I would just read pages and pages, highlight all the things I thought were important, write down word for word what was in the textbook in my notebook, and when it actually came time for me to apply that knowledge to the test I was writing, it felt like I had retained very little of it because I spent all my time just memorizing and just familiarizing myself with the information, but not actually integrating it in a way that I could explain it to somebody else or apply it to my actual work. The second mistake that people often make is passive learning, and so this is just taking in a bunch of information and not actually doing anything with it. So this might look like the person who is reading a bunch of books or watching a bunch of videos or scrolling through a bunch of information online, and then they finish what they're doing and they move on and they assume that they've learned the information. But if someone were to ask them a couple of days later to explain what they've seen, they wouldn't be able to, because you actually didn't do anything to integrate it. You just passively took in the information. Your brain remembers things a lot better when it has to produce something with it. So some simple fixes for this is if you are passively taking in information, after you have done so, try to write it down in really simple terms, or try to explain it to a friend, or try to curate a post on social media that distills it down to the simple concepts and gives it to somebody else. One of the fastest ways for you to learn information is to actually teach it to somebody else, because you have to grasp the information enough for you to explain it in simple terms. The last mistake people make is assuming topics are too complicated for them. People hear information about a subject and they immediately think that they're just not smart enough for it because they don't understand it. When in reality, it's not that they're not smart enough, it's just that it was poorly explained, and it's been too muddied up with unnecessary jargon and complexity. So this goes back to the Feynman technique. The simple fix is just trying to distill it down to very simple terms. How would you explain it to a 12-year-old? How can you take all of these really complicated topics and jargon and nonsense and distill it down to something very simple? And when you go through the practice of trying to do that, you realize that a lot of these topics that feel way too complicated and way too over your head are actually not that hard. It's not that you're not smart enough to take it in, it's just not being explained well enough for you to learn it in a meaningful way. So to recap, the 3 common mistakes people make when it comes to learning new things is the recognition trap, passive learning, and assuming topics are too complicated. The real test of understanding is not whether or not something sounds familiar, it's whether or not you can explain it in simple terms. Because if you can teach it to somebody else, you truly understand it. So the next time you're trying to learn something new, I want you to try this. Close the book, close the video, and try speaking the topic out loud as if you're teaching it to somebody else. If you can distill it down in very simple terms and explain it to somebody else, then you've demonstrated that you have a much deeper understanding of it. And if you can't, well then good, that's just good data, right? You figured out the gaps that you need to go back and improve on. And if you want more simple tips for improving your mindset, improving your growth, and simple strategies to create a better life, make sure you hit that subscribe button before you leave. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.